Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Rebecca, and I'll be monitoring the chat and helping you if you have any technical issues throughout. Today, we'll be focusing on FME Server, how to get the most from your automations. Your host for today will be Ian Fletcher, and I will hand over to him shortly. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. You've all been placed on mute. However, we welcome your comments and questions by typing these into the question panel. We will address these at the end of today's webinar in the Q&A session. If we don't get a chance to answer your question, don't worry, we will follow up with you afterwards. Finally, today's webinar is being recorded and we will share the link with you after the webinar via email. Over to you, Ian.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ian Fletcher. I am a senior FME consultant here at OneSpatial, and today we are going to discuss how to get the most out of automations in FME Server. Before we get stuck in, here is a little background on ourselves here at OneSpatial. We are a spatial solutions provider with our head office in Cambridge, but we also have many offices across the globe. We work with customers within a number of key industry sectors, such as utilities, transport, engineering, and all levels of local and national government. And we have a number of technology partners that we work closely with, including Safe Software, the producers of the FME family of products that we are here to discuss today. Within OneSpatial, we have been working with and reselling FME for quite a while now. We provide support for all of the FME products, so from FME Desktop through to FME Server and FME Cloud. And we also incorporate many of the FME products into our own custom solutions. Within the FME division itself, we have a team of skilled FME operators, many of whom are certified with SAFE. So the chances are, if you have a problem with any of your FME products, the chances are we're going to be able to help you with your issue. So with that as an introduction out of the way, let's get stuck straight in. So hopefully we are all familiar with FME workbenches sitting on our desktop machine and running on demand whenever we wish to manually trigger them by hitting the green Go button in the toolbar. We can import some data in any number of formats using a reader. We can then process it using a string of transformers and then write it out to another location, maybe with another format, maybe with another entirely different schema using a writer. Critically though, this process is inherently manual as it relies upon a user to manually open a workspace and run it on demand. So what if we want to automate a desktop process? What tools within desktop and our operating system can we employ to make some simple automations? Well, there are a number of workarounds and solutions we could consider, so let's briefly discuss those options. Firstly, we could create a workspace runner, and this will create a batch process over a directory of source files. And depending on how your computer is set up and the desired task, the workspace runner can process multiple jobs concurrently or one after the other. We could run FME Desktop directly from command line. Helpfully, when running a workspace, the workspace translation log will generate the necessary code in order to run it directly from command line. And this is a great option to choose for people who have access to FME workspaces but may be more comfortable with code rather than the FME interface itself. We could set up a batch processing job using a bat file to run over a number of source files. And building on this, we could then take this one step further and schedule the running of a repeatable bat file using Windows Task Scheduler. One thing to note about Task Scheduler is that sometimes IT teams within companies will not allow you to use the Task Scheduler for security reasons. So if this is something you're looking at, it's definitely worth contacting your IT team first to seek approval for this option. The point of this, generally speaking, is that you can use inbuilt desktop and operating system tools already available to you to achieve quite a lot. However, the framework to achieve this is still fairly rigid. Looking now at some of the options in FME Server before we even get to automations, there are a number of things that we can do if we wish to automate a task that cannot be achieved using the desktop solutions we've just seen alone. Firstly, if we wish to regularly run a task, we can set up a basic schedule. For example, in this case here, we can run a workspace on the 18th day of each month, but this is limiting because it'll only trigger the job at that specific time, regardless of whether any incoming data has changed. We could also develop more complex schedules using cron expressions, In this example on the screen, we're using an automation. We're using a cron expression to run a scheduled workspace at 10:15 on the 15th day of each month. Fundamentally, though, schedules are still limiting because you can only trigger a single workspace with a schedule and only at a time that is pre-specified. If you want to trigger more than one workspace at a specific time, or if you wish to run a workspace reactively based on an event, then you will need a FME server automation, and that is the subject of the rest of this talk. Automations are the FME server solution to this issue. They're a data-driven workflow that can run whenever a certain trigger is detected. This can be a directory watch, an incoming email detection, or a system event. And there are many other options available to you from the list of choices. Automations combine a number of functions into a new toolkit, including notifications, which some of you may be familiar with from older versions of Server. But they also include scheduled tasks, which we've just discussed, and also system events. So to get started with an automation, look at the menu option on the left-hand toolbar when you open up Server for the first time. Automations in FME Server follow a very similar structure to the intuitive FME desktop point and click interface that we're hopefully familiar with. Each automation starts with a trigger, which will listen to and receive messages from an external client. And so long as the automation is enabled, following the trigger being activated by its defined condition, it will then trigger an action. So once a trigger is received, an action will then be run. These can be internal. So for example, you can run the data through a series of server hosted tools, or maybe an FME workspace that you've developed in FME desktop and then uploaded to the server. Actions can also be external, such as sending a message to an external client. All actions can be strung together just like transformers in desktop in a conventional workspace, so that any sequence of processes can be completed in any order. Actions will have a success and failure port just like FME transformers, and this allows us to manage the behavior of our data as it flows through a workflow, and also to identify and manage bad data as it arrives. So before we go any further, let's create a very simple automation just to start getting you thinking about what we can do. So let me just switch my screen over to Server. This is what you see when you open Server. And to create an automation for the first time, we're going to go to Automations and Build Automation. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to create a automation that will listen for a file being added to a directory, and then it will send an email to a specified email address to tell us that something has been added. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the trigger, and we are going to tell it we want to look at a modified directory. We're going to use the parameters options to tell FME Server which folder we wish to listen to. We're only going to be interested in items which are added to the folder, and we're going to tell the trigger to listen for changes every 5 seconds. So let's just quickly validate that before we go any further. Yep, so you can see that's a valid folder, so we're going to hit apply. Next thing we're going to do is add an external action. So when the file is added, it's then going to trigger this action here, and this is going to be sending an email to a client. So if you just bear with me whilst I fill out these options, you can load a template, or you can fill them out yourself. So just give me a second. It's MTP. This is where I quite often make mistakes with the typing. 587. Okay. And then just bear with me. So that is going to be start from. So the email subject is going to be test demo. it's going to be a text file, and then in the body of the email, we're going to write a message to tell the recipient of the email what has changed. So we can use the various parameters to give a bit more information. So let's give the file path and then the file name. Okay, hit that. Let's then validate that quickly just to check everything is good. And great, we got a valid message. So we hit apply. Then following good practice, we're then just going to annotate this just to show the user what we're doing. Cool. And then so finally, just before an automation will work, we're going to need to give it a name and save it. And obviously it helps if I can spell automation. Good. Okay, and then we're going to start it. So hit start there. And so if everything's worked correctly, what should now happen, if I go to that shared folder, Automations Webinar, I can upload a file, and that should hopefully ping us an email to that specified email address to show us that something's changed. So if I then go to my Outlook, hopefully, and this is where things have gone slightly wrong in practice because it does take can take a while. Fantastic. So you can see that it sent an email to my address. It's told us the location of the file and the name of the file. Obviously, you can add a lot more complexity to this if you wish, but just as a demo, I think this is a nice way of beginning to think about what we can do. Let me just go back to the slides now. Fantastic. Let's now take a little bit of a closer look at some of the components of an automation, starting with triggers. A trigger is a server tool which will listen out for an incoming notification from an application or a system. Triggers support a range of protocols which allow automations to receive messages from a large number of sources, including Dropbox, Azure, Amazon, and any of your popular email providers. Internal system events and applications can also be used as triggers. So for example, you may wish a trigger to listen for an updated folder, as we've just seen. Maybe a certain workspace on the server will fail and you wish to create an alert for that. Or maybe a license file is about to expire and you wish to tell your IT provider to buy some more licenses. These provide the foundation for all automations, and a near infinite number of combinations can be created depending on which triggers are chosen as the starting point of your automation, and then thus what they're also pointing at. Much like the readers at the start of a desktop workspace, each trigger will come with a series of parameters to customize, as we just saw in that demo. Once a trigger has been chosen, the next component of an automation is an action. These are a suite of server tools to process the message that comes from a trigger and to optionally send outgoing notifications back to an external client. Actions can be external or internal and are differentiated on the canvas by their color, with orange actions being internal and blue actions being external. Internal actions primarily rely on the Run Workspace tool, but can also include server-specific functions like the split and merge option and filters, which will allow you to orchestrate how the workflows are run and any decision-making options along the way. External actions will deliver the data back to where it needs to be, and we can use many of the same protocols used to receive data from clients to send it straight back again. They can be configured with some basic parameters and are used to connect the output of an automation to another application where the data needs to be stored or used. And as I said, also, as we saw in our demonstration, we can also use it to send messages without actually necessarily needing to move any data around. So in way of a bit of a midpoint summary, what are the benefits of using an automation over some of the alternatives? Well, just like FME Desktop, the advantages of automations in FME Server come from the flexibility these tools give you to come to a solution that fits your problem. So depending on where your data is and what event you're interested in, for example, automation triggers can respond to any number of conditions that you wish to manage. Furthermore, multiple triggers can be supplied to an internal action, allowing it to listen to a number of different events at the same time. Automations are reactive and can respond in real or near real time to any number of conditions you wish a process to listen to. So, for example, instead of waiting for a scheduled task to pick up a change in a system, automations can detect some new data, process it, and send it on its way as soon as that change is detected. As well as allowing for complex data processing using internal workspace actions to translate some data, automations also allow for the management of very simple but manual back-end tasks also. So by connecting a directory trigger straight to an emailer, as we saw in that example, an automation can passively watch for some new incoming data and alert you to where a shapefile hits a folder without ever having to actually open the file itself. This hands-off approach to alerting users to any system changes in the background is a great way of freeing up more time for more interesting, innovative tasks. And yeah, triggers can often act as the glue between systems that would otherwise not necessarily talk to one another. So, for example, in a recent client project that I looked at, we used a webhook trigger to pick up asset changes supplied by SAP as a JSON message. We then processed them in an internal workspace that I designed in FME Worktop, and then we supplied them back to ArcGIS Online as a shapefile for further processing by the client. And finally, automations come with a series of troubleshooting techniques, some of them more advanced than others, and these allow you to debug and manage unexpected events and data that may hit an automation that would otherwise cause an unexpected or invalid result, or worse, just a failure. So let's look a bit more detail at some of these troubleshooting techniques, because in many ways I think they are the unsung heroes of FME servers. These allow you to cope with a wide range of scenarios that may, as I said, otherwise cause an automation to fail. And yeah, this is an essential part of the toolkit because it allows a fully hands-off approach to manage and handle any of the issues that you might have in the process. Starting with logging as the most simple approach. So logging, whenever an automation is triggered, a log file is created with a unique ID which corresponds to the job that's been processed. And troubleshooting can be as simple as just keeping an eye on the generated log pass-fail statuses to detect issues. And these are flagged with a very simple traffic light system depending on the issue severity. Automated retries can be set up on an automation to allow workspaces to be automatically submitted in case of an unexpected failure or connection issue. So if a job fails, it can be automatically resubmitted to a job queue until either the process succeeds or the process fails every specified retry attempt. And this is a fantastic method of guaranteeing delivery after a connection issue or external component failure. So yeah, retry settings can be configured as part of the parameters of the relevant actions, and are available for configuration in the right-hand dialog box that will open when you click on an action. Depending on the number of engines associated with your server license, queue control can help to manage bottlenecks and performance issues in your automations in order to prioritize certain automations and processes. So this can be very helpful for automations running in quick successions, or during times when you will have a lot of automations triggered at once, as this provides dedicated engine capacity for certain automations and processes for which to deal with them. Yeah, notifications as external and internal actions. So as mentioned, every trigger and action will have a pass and fail port, just like many of the transformers in desktop. So this allows for action failures to be connected to internal actions such as loggers and secondary workspaces in an attempt to fix a problem, and also to external actions such as emailers in order to alert a problem alert a person if a problem has been detected and cannot be fixed automatically. And finally, system events. So these are a type of trigger which listens out to a particular event on the server itself. So for troubleshooting purposes, one of the most useful trigger events to observe is the error message logged event, which will listen to the logging directory and trigger whenever an error warning is generated by a job. And again, this is a great way of setting up email alerts or secondary processing options if an issue is detected. So finally, let's just have a look at a bit more of a complicated live example. And here's one I made earlier case. So if I quickly share my screen. So what I have here is an ArcGIS online project, and I have, so I'm an avid runner. I live in London, so I often record all my runs on Strava, and I wanted to create a project in Arc where I can visualize all of these runs on a map. So what I did is I created a workspace that uses the Strava API to download all of my recent runs as GPX files, and I've created a project that will then visualize them in Arc. So they all have various parameters associated with them. And yes, so obviously, what if I want to add a new run to this route? Well, I've created an automation to deal with that. So just for the purposes of this demonstration, notice there are no runs currently going through Green Park and St James's Park. So what we have set up in Server, we've got this ArcGIS Online Updater automation. I'm going to just start that quickly. So again, we've got a directory watch. So what's going to happen is I've downloaded a new GPX to add. I'm going to put it in this folder here. It's going to be picked up by this process GPX file workspace, and that is going to take the GPX file, translate it into a shapefile with the desired schema, and it's going to upload it to ArcGIS Online. If that process is completed successfully, I'm going to get a Microsoft Teams notification. If it fails, I'm going to get a different notification. And if an invalid output is detected, so something that isn't a GPX file, I'm going to get a specified email alert. So that's now enabled. So let's go ahead and add some content to the shared folder. So bear with me here. I'm going to upload a valid GPX file and an invalid text file. So everything being well, within 5 seconds, that trigger is going to have detected some new content. If we look at the jobs, we should be able to verify that the process has worked as desired. And yep, we can see, so at 11:23, the process was triggered. So hopefully, all being well, I can now refresh this view here in Arc, and with any luck, you should be able to see, if we zoom in, yep, so there you can see the automation has detected the new GPX file and has created our input shapefile and then sent that to ArcGIS Online for visualization. And as a bonus, what I should have now, so in my Microsoft Teams alerts channel, I've been given an alert that the 2 files have been updated, and hopefully with any luck, so we can see that an invalid file has been detected, and that obviously will provide an administrator with a chance to deal with that issue. Fantastic, that worked. So let me just go back to the presentation and we will finish off the remainder of the slides. So as a summary, we've gone through some of the basics of automations in FME Server and introduced you to some of the terminology that you will come across when beginning to think about building an automation yourself. So we've talked about the various types of triggers that you may wish to look at and the number of events that they can listen in for. And we've discussed internal and external actions and the various types of processes that you can put in place once a trigger is activated. And finally, we've looked at the troubleshooting techniques that you may wish to use when thinking about guaranteed delivery and issues that may arise as part of the process. Just as a way of conclusion, hopefully in the post-seminar email, you hopefully will have a list of all of the resources that I found helpful when building this presentation. And if you need any help, obviously there's a lot of online resources there for you. So on onespatial.com, you will be able to see a list of all of the training events, the training materials and events that we have available to you. Obviously, go to safe.com and knowledgesafe.com to look at the FME community and the Q&A forum. And yeah, if you are on a company that has a support contract with us, or you're interested in purchasing a support contract, obviously you can email support@onespatial.com with any of your questions, and we will hopefully get back to you with a response. And finally, if registrations are now open for the 6th annual Smarter Data, Smarter World conference on November the 10th in London at the Royal Institution. If you wish to attend or want to find out any more information, please visit the conference page, and a link is shared for that. And that will also include the registration form. So the theme of this year's event is building and sustaining your data foundations. Hopefully we'll see many of you there later on this year. Yeah, thank you, and I'll now open it up for any questions that you may have. How does Server know whether to run a workspace in 32-bit or 34 mode? Let me just see what other, okay, someone's already answered that question. Thank you, Dave. Are there any more questions from the audience? Doesn't appear to be. Rebecca, have we got any more questions or anything else to say?
I have another question here. Can you watch a feature class on an Esri enterprise database?
Can you watch a feature class on an Esri enterprise database? I'm pretty sure you will be able to. I'm not entirely sure for certain, but I can certainly check and get back to you about that. My strong suspicion is the answer is yes.
So there isn't just to chip in, Ian, there isn't a direct FME server watcher for dedicated database types. In that scenario, you would probably have to have an automation that was set up to poll the database and check for change. So you'd need to have some way of recording change. So the common way that we see that happen is records being timestamped when they're entered, and then your process would go and check the specific table, in this case a specific feature class, and find out if there was anything that has happened after a certain timestamp. That would be one approach, but the watching capabilities are down to some of the file storage mechanisms. The only other, or one other approach there might be to set up a trigger. So you'd have a webhook set up. So you'd have a trigger on the database when a record got changed. That stored procedure would trigger a request to FME Server to run a particular task.
Can you apply this with PostgreSQL and update on GeoServer as well, instead of the example given with ArcGIS Online?
Dave, I think that's one for you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the scenario there is, rather than publishing your running data directly to Strava, could your data be sent to an open source database like PostGIS? And absolutely, the answer is yes. Yeah. The target, one of the main flexibilities of FME is that your endpoints where you put your data, there are 535 different places, and publishing to an API is just one of them, but actually going to a file store, a database is also achievable.
Oh, I see. Yes. So in my case, I used the Strava API and I pulled down all of my runs automatically, and just for the purposes of this demonstration, I stored them all temporarily as a series of shapefiles on my desktop. But yeah, once you've got the connection set up to Strava, yeah, you can put them in any number of places that you wish, and you can obviously then build. You can build the Strava API into or an API, any API into the automation as you wish.
And there's one final question in there about, I think they're hexagon environments. I have to say, not familiar with those specific products. There are hexagon formats supported directly in FME, Jamie. It's possible that you can go direct to an Intergraph format that those products can read. It is also possible that those environments are storing in a standard database environment that FME can get to. I think that's possibly one you could follow up with if you drop us a note to fme@onespatial.com, and we can pick that up with you directly about that particular environment. And that's your lot, Ian, I think.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for attending. If there are any other questions, do get in touch.